Kim Tae-ho rubbed his tired eyes and looked at the screen again. The numbers were still the same. 3 days of deep space monitoring, and all he had found were the usual cosmic background noise and some solar wind from distant stars. His job as communications officer aboard the research ship Harmony's Edge was usually boring, but today felt different. The ship moved slowly through the empty space near the Kepler 442 system. Captain Lee Min-ho had chosen this route because it was safe and quiet, perfect for testing their new long-range communication equipment. The crew of 42 people had been out here for 6 months, mapping star systems and looking for signs of life. Tae-ho stretched in his chair and was about to take another sip of coffee when something made him stop. A small blip appeared on his screen, not the usual background static. This was different. It had a pattern. "Computer, isolate that signal," he said. The machine hummed quietly as it worked. The signal became clearer, but it was still very weak. Tae-ho frowned as he listened through his headphones. It sounded almost like music, but broken and sad. There were gaps where pieces seemed to be missing. He called over to Park So-jin, who was working at the language analysis station. "Hey, So-jin, can you come look at this?" So-jin walked over, her long black hair tied back in a simple ponytail. She was the best xenolinguist on the ship, which meant she studied alien languages. Of course, they had never found any real alien languages to study. Until now, maybe. "What do you have?" she asked, putting on a spare set of headphones. "I'm not sure. It's coming from somewhere in the direction of that red star system, about 4 light years away." Tae-ho pointed at his screen. "It's not natural, too organized, but it's also not like any human signal I've ever heard." So Jin listened carefully. For several minutes, her face grew serious. "This isn't random noise. There are repeating patterns, mathematical sequences, and listen to this part." She pointed to a section of the waveform on the screen. "That sounds almost like someone crying." They worked together for the next 2 hours, trying to clean up the signal. The ship's powerful computers slowly filtered out the cosmic interference. What they found made both of them go cold. It was definitely a message. Not just noise or natural phenomena. Someone, or something, had created this signal and sent it out into space. The mathematical parts seemed to be some kind of universal language, using prime numbers and basic physics concepts that any intelligent species would understand. But the other parts, the parts that sounded like crying, were much more complex. They seemed to carry emotion, desperation, and something that both humans recognized even though they had never heard anything like it before. It was the sound of a species in terrible trouble. "We need to get Captain Lee," So-jin said quietly. Captain Lee Min-ho arrived within minutes. He was a tall man with graying hair and kind eyes, but right now he looked worried. He listened to their explanation and then to the signal itself. "How far away did you say this came from?" he asked. "The computer says about 4 light years, sir. That means this message is at least 4 years old," Tae-ho replied. "Could it be from Earth? Some kind of delayed transmission?" So Jin shook her head. "No, sir. We've run it through every human language database we have. This is definitely not human. The mathematical parts make sense to us, but the emotional parts, they're using sound frequencies and patterns that human voices can't make." Captain Lee was quiet for a long time, staring at the wave patterns on the screen. The Harmony's Edge was just a research vessel. They weren't equipped for first contact with alien species. That was supposed to be handled by much larger ships, with diplomatic teams and military protection. "Can you translate any more of it?" he asked. "I'm trying," So-jin said. "The AI is helping, but it's slow work." "Give me another few hours," the captain nodded. "Both of you keep working on this. Don't tell the rest of the crew yet. Let's see what we're dealing with first." So Jin worked through the night. She missed dinner and barely noticed when most of the crew went to sleep. The message was like a puzzle, but one where half the pieces were missing and the other half were from a puzzle she had never seen before. By morning, she had made progress. The mathematical parts were becoming clear. They contained star charts showing the location where the signal came from. They also contained what looked like population numbers, but the numbers were going down fast. The emotional parts were harder, but the AI was learning. It began to suggest possible meanings for different sound patterns. Words like help and danger and dying kept appearing in the translations. When Tae-ho came back to work, he found So-jin asleep at her desk, her head resting on her arms. The computers were still working, still trying to decode the alien message. "So-jin," he said gently, shaking her shoulder. "Wake up. What did you find?" She lifted her head, blinking in the bright lights. "It's a distress call," she said, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. "They're asking for help, but Tae-ho—" She looked at him with frightened eyes. "I think we're too late." She showed him what the computer had translated during the night. The message told a terrible story. The beings who sent it called themselves the Villani. They lived on a planet orbiting that red star, and they were dying. Something called the Dominion had come to their world. The Villani had tried to talk to them, tried to make peace. But the Dominion wasn't interested in peace. They wanted the planet and everything on it. They were taking the Villani people away, and no one knew where. The message contained coordinates and a desperate warning. The Villani knew they were going to die, but they wanted someone, anyone, to know they had existed. They wanted to be remembered. But the warning was what made both humans feel sick with fear. The Dominion didn't just take one world. They moved from star to star, taking everything they wanted. They were organized and powerful, and they never stopped. "Do not let them find you," the message said. "Hide, run. They come for all who show kindness. They harvest worlds like farmers harvest grain. We tried to surrender. We tried to give them what they wanted. It was not enough. They want everything." The message ended with something that sounded like singing, but sad and broken. The computer translated it as, "Remember us. Please remember that we lived. Please remember that we loved our children and our art and our beautiful world. Do not let them make us disappear." Tae-ho stared at the screen for a long time. "Finally," he said, "we have to tell the captain." So-jin nodded. "And then we have to tell Earth." They found Captain Lee in his ready room, drinking coffee and reading reports. His face went pale as they explained what they had discovered. "Are you absolutely certain about this translation?" he asked. "As certain as we can be, sir," So-jin replied. "The computer gives it a 94% confidence rating, and the mathematical parts are definitely accurate. The star charts match our navigation data perfectly." Captain Lee stood up and walked to the small window in his room. Outside, the stars looked peaceful and distant. It was hard to believe that somewhere, out there, an entire species had died crying for help. "How long ago do you think this happened?" he asked. "Based on the signal strength and distance, probably about 4 years ago," Tae-ho said. "Maybe longer." The message was set to repeat automatically, but it's been getting weaker as their equipment fails. The captain was quiet for several minutes. Then he turned back to them. "I want you to prepare a complete report. Everything you've found. Send it to Earth Command immediately." "Yes, sir," both of them said. "And I want you to keep monitoring. See if there are any other signals out there. If this Dominion is really moving from star to star." He didn't finish the sentence, but they all knew what he was thinking. If the Dominion was still out there, still moving through space and destroying civilizations, then Earth might be next. As Tae-ho and So-jin left the captain's room, they could hear him making preparations to change course. The Harmony's Edge was no longer just a research mission. They had become witnesses to genocide, and possibly the first warning of humanity's greatest threat. The Villani were gone, but their cry for help had finally been heard. The question now was whether humanity would listen in time to save themselves. Captain Lee Min-ho stood on the bridge of the Harmony's edge, staring at the star charts displayed on the main screen. The red dot marking the Vellani home system seemed to pulse like a warning beacon. Earth Command had sent their reply 3 hours ago. Their orders were clear. Maintain radio silence and return to Earth immediately. But Lee couldn't stop thinking about the alien message. The Vellani had died alone, crying for help that never came. Now their world sat empty in space, and no one except his crew even knew they had existed. "Captain," said Commander Park Dong-woo, his second in command, "Earth Command is waiting for our confirmation. We should start the journey home." Lee nodded slowly, but his hand didn't move toward the navigation controls. "Dong-woo, how long? Would it take us to reach the Vellani system, sir?" Dong-woo looked surprised. "About 18 days at maximum speed, but our orders—" "I know what our orders are." Lee turned to face his crew. The bridge was quiet, except for the hum of computers and life support systems. "But I keep thinking about something. What if there are survivors? What if some of the Vellani are still alive, hiding somewhere in their system?" Park So-jin looked up from her station. "Captain, the message suggested they were all taken or killed. The signal has been getting weaker every day. Their equipment is failing." "Suggested but not confirmed," Lee replied. "We're scientists and explorers. Our job is to discover the truth, not to assume we know it." The bridge crew exchanged glances. They all knew that disobeying Earth Command could end their careers, but they also knew their captain was a good man who had never led them wrong. Kim Tae-ho spoke up from his communication station. "Sir, I've been thinking about the message too. The Vellani mentioned coordinates, but they also mentioned something else. Hidden archives, places where they stored their history and culture." "What are you suggesting?" Lee asked. "Maybe we can't save the Vellani people, but we could save their memory, learn about who they were, make sure they're not completely forgotten." Lee looked around the bridge again. He could see the answer in their faces. His crew wanted to go too. They had all heard the alien message, the desperate plea for remembrance. It had touched something deep in their human hearts. "Dong-woo, set course for the Vellani system. Maximum speed." "Yes, sir," Dong-woo replied with a small smile. The Harmony's edge turned away from Earth and toward the unknown. The journey took 16 days of steady travel through empty space. During that time, So-jin worked to decode more of the Vellani message, while Tai-ho searched for any other signals from their destination. Dr. Choi Hye-jin, the ship's archaeologist, spent her time preparing for what they might find. She had studied dead civilizations on Earth, but never an entire alien species that had been destroyed. The thought both excited and terrified her. "What do you think we'll find?" asked Lee Yu-jin, one of the younger crew members. "I don't know," Hye-jin admitted. "The message mentioned that the Dominion strips planets bare. They might have taken everything valuable and left only ruins. As they got closer to the red star system, their sensors began picking up more details. There were 8 planets orbiting the star, but only one was in the right position for life. As they approached, the screens showed them something that made everyone on the bridge go silent. The planet was brown and gray where it should have been blue and green. There were no clouds in the atmosphere, no signs of weather patterns. Even from space, they could see geometric scars carved into the surface where cities used to be. "My God," whispered engineer Lim Jae-ho. "What did they do to it?" The Harmony's edge entered orbit around the dead world. Their scanners showed no life signs, no functioning technology, no radio emissions. The planet was as empty as a tomb. But Hye-jin noticed something interesting in the scanner data. "Captain, look at this! There are structures underground. Deep underground. Some of them are still intact." "Could be natural cave systems," suggested Dong-woo. "No, these are too regular, too organized. I think the Vellani built underground shelters or storage areas. Maybe that's where they kept their archives." Lee made his decision quickly. Prepare a landing party. Hee-jin, So-jin, Tae-ho, and 4 security personnel. We're going down to investigate." 2 hours later, their shuttle landed on the surface of the dead world. The ground was hard and cracked, covered with a fine gray dust that the wind blew in. Patterns like desert sand. In the distance, they could see the remains of what had once been a great city. The buildings were gone, but their foundations remained. Perfect geometric shapes carved into the ground, as if someone had used a giant knife to slice away everything above ground level. Here and there, twisted pieces of metal stuck up from the ruins like broken bones. "The Dominion was very thorough," So-jin said quietly. "They didn't just destroy the buildings. They took them, harvested all the materials." Hye-jin led them toward the largest set of ruins, following her scanner readings. They walked for an hour across the empty landscape before finding what they were looking for. A metal door, partially buried in the gray dust. It was made of some kind of alien alloy that had survived whatever the Dominion had done to the surface. Tae-ho used a portable power unit to activate the door's emergency systems. It opened with a soft hiss, revealing stairs that led down into darkness. "The air is breathable," reported Security Chief Oh Min-soo, checking his instruments. "Same oxygen-nitrogen mix as Earth, just a little thinner." They descended into the underground facility. Emergency lights flickered on as they walked, powered by some kind of backup system that had been running for 4 years. The walls were covered with smooth panels that glowed with soft, warm light. "It's beautiful," whispered So-jin. "Look at the designs." The walls were decorated with flowing patterns that seemed to move and change as they watched. They weren't just decorative. Hye-jin realized they were telling stories, showing the history and culture of the Vallani people. They reached a large chamber filled with strange crystal-like structures that hummed quietly with energy. These were the archives the Vallani had mentioned in their message. Thousands of years of history, art, science, and culture, all stored in alien technology that humanity barely understood. But it was working. As they approached the crystals, holographic images appeared in the air above them. They saw the Vallani as they had lived. Tall, graceful beings with long limbs and skin that seemed to shimmer with different colors. They had built beautiful cities, with flowing architecture that looked more like art than buildings. The holograms showed a peaceful civilization. The Vallani created music that sounded like wind chimes mixed with whale songs. They made art that changed and evolved over time. They loved their children and cared for their world. Then the images changed. The holograms showed the arrival of the Dominion, massive ships that blocked out the sun, beings in dark armor who spoke in cold, mechanical voices. The Vallani had tried to communicate, tried to offer friendship and cooperation. The Dominion had responded with demands. They wanted the planet's resources. They wanted the Vallani people to work as slaves. When the Vallani tried to negotiate, tried to find a peaceful solution, the Dominion had seen it as weakness. Hye-jin watched in horror as the holograms showed the final days. Vallani cities being methodically dismantled, people being loaded onto ships and taken away. Those who tried to hide or resist were simply eliminated. But the worst part was the efficiency of it all. The Dominion had done this many times before. They had turned genocide into an industrial process. "Captain," Tae-ho called out, "you need to see this." He had found another set of crystal archives. These ones showed star charts and data about other civilizations. The Dominion had been moving through this part of the galaxy for hundreds of years, destroying world after world. They followed a pattern, always taking the easiest targets first, and according to the charts, Earth was directly in their path. "How long do we have?" Lee asked. So-jin studied the data carefully. "Based on their previous pattern and the time since they left here. Maybe 2 years. 3 at the most. The landing party spent 6 more hours in the underground archives. copying as much data as they could carry. They learned about Dominion technology, their military tactics, their weaknesses. Most importantly, they learned that the Dominion had never faced serious resistance. Every civilization they had encountered had tried to surrender or negotiate. None had ever fought back effectively. The Dominion expected submission, and when? They got it. They showed no mercy anyway. As they prepared to leave, Heijin took one last look at the holographic displays. She saw Villani children playing games that looked almost human. She saw artists creating beauty that would never be seen again. She saw a people who had loved life and hoped for peace. "We'll remember you," she whispered to the empty chamber. "I promise." Back on the Harmony's edge, Captain Lee called an emergency meeting. The crew gathered in the main conference room as he explained what they had found. The reality was even worse than the original message had suggested. The Dominion isn't just a military force, he told them. They're a machine designed to consume entire civilizations. They've perfected the process over centuries, and they're heading toward Earth. "What do we do?" asked Dongwu. Lee looked at the data they had gathered. Battle plans, technology. The Harmony's Edge arrived at Earth after 28 days of hard travel. Captain Lee Min-ho had pushed the engines beyond their normal limits, knowing that every day mattered. The crew had spent the journey preparing their report and studying the Villani data they had recovered. Admiral Song Ji-woo was waiting for them at Luna Station. She was a small woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. As the head of Earth's defense forces, she had expected a routine debrief about communication equipment testing. Instead, she found herself listening to the most terrifying intelligence report in human history. "You're telling me that an alien empire is systematically destroying civilizations across the galaxy," she said, after Lee had finished his presentation. "And they're heading toward Earth." "Yes, ma'am," Lee replied. "Based on the Villani archives, they follow a predictable pattern. They move through star systems in order, taking about 2 to 3 years between major conquests to process their captured resources and integrate new technology." Admiral Song studied the holographic star charts that Sojin had projected above the conference table. Red dots marked the dead worlds the Dominion had conquered. Green dots showed systems they hadn't reached yet. Earth was directly in the path of red dots. "How reliable is this information?" asked General Kim Hae-won, the Admiral's tactical advisor. "Doctor," Choi Hae-jin answered. "We cross-referenced the Villani data with our own astronomical observations. Every world they marked as destroyed shows the same signs we saw at the Villani homeworld. No radio emissions, no life signs, altered atmospheric composition. The pattern is consistent across dozens of star systems." 2 years, Admiral Song said quietly. "Maybe 3. That's not enough time to build a proper defense fleet." "Ma'am, with respect," said Lee, "I don't think a traditional defense fleet is the answer. The Villani had a defense fleet. So did the other civilizations. The Dominion has centuries of experience defeating conventional military forces." The meeting continued for 6 hours. Representatives from Earth's major governments joined by video link, asking the same questions over and over. How could they be sure the threat was real? How could they trust alien data they couldn't fully understand? Why hadn't the Dominion attacked Earth already if they were so powerful? Dr. Yang Subin, Earth's leading expert on alien psychology, arrived on the 3rd day of meetings. She had spent her career studying theoretical alien behavior patterns, never expecting to encounter actual aliens. Now she found herself analyzing data from a genocidal empire. "The Dominion's behavior is consistent with what we call a resource maximization pattern," she explained to the assembled leadership. "They don't see other species as people. They see them as resources to be harvested efficiently. That's why they offer surrender terms. It's easier to process a cooperative population than a resistant one." President Han Ji-soo, joining the meeting from Seoul, asked the question everyone was thinking. What happened to the species that surrendered? The Villani tried to negotiate. Where did the Dominion take them? Yang Subin looked uncomfortable. Based on the data patterns, I believe they were processed, turned into biological resources. The Dominion doesn't keep slaves long term. It's more efficient to extract everything useful and move on. The room went silent. The reality of what they faced was sinking in. This wasn't conquest in any human sense. It was extermination with industrial efficiency. Over the following weeks, the debate spread from military headquarters to government buildings around the world. Some leaders wanted to immediately begin peace negotiations with the Dominion. Others suggested hiding Earth's radio signals and hoping the aliens would pass by without noticing them. Dr. Yang Subin worked day and night, analyzing every piece of Dominion behavior data they had recovered. Her conclusions were grim but clear. Negotiation is impossible, she reported to the United Earth Defense Council. The Dominion doesn't negotiate. They make demands and expect compliance. Every civilization that tried to find a peaceful solution was destroyed anyway. What about hiding? Asked Representative Liu Wei from the Asian Federation. Also impossible. The Dominion has advanced sensors and follows systematic search patterns. They will find Earth whether we're broadcasting signals or not. They probably already know we're here. Admiral Song had been reviewing military options with her staff. The numbers were depressing. Earth had 12 space-capable warships, most of them lightly armed research or patrol vessels. The Dominion, according to Volani records, traveled in fleets of hundreds of ships. We could evacuate, suggested General Kim. Load colony ships and scatter humanity across distant star systems. Evacuate 4 billion people? Admiral Song shook her head. Even if we had enough ships, which we don't, the Dominion would just hunt down the colony worlds later. They're methodical. They don't leave loose ends. Captain Lee had been invited to join the military planning sessions. His crew had become Earth's only experts on the Dominion threat. Ma'am, there's something else we need to consider. The Volani archives contain technical data about Dominion equipment and tactics. We might not be able to match their numbers, but we could learn from their weaknesses. What weaknesses? Asked Admiral Song. They've conquered hundreds of worlds. That's exactly the problem, Lee replied. They've won so many easy victories that they've become predictable. They expect every encounter to follow the same pattern. Demand surrender, demonstrate overwhelming force, process the population. They've never had to adapt to serious resistance. Park So-jin, who had been quietly studying translation protocols, spoke up. The Volani data shows something interesting. The Dominion forces are made up of many different alien species, but they all follow the same command structure. Very rigid hierarchy. If we could disrupt their coordination... You're talking about guerrilla warfare, said General Kim. Hit and run tactics. More than that, Lee said. I'm talking about being unpredictable. Every species the Dominion has faced tried to meet them head-on or tried to surrender. What if we did neither? What if we made them adapt to something they've never seen before? The debates continued for 2 months. Earth's government struggled to accept the reality of the threat, let alone agree on a response. Some nations wanted to build bunkers and hide underground. Others pushed for massive military spending to build traditional warships. Meanwhile, long-range sensor arrays began picking up troubling signals from the outer system. At first, they looked like natural phenomena, solar flares, asteroid impacts, the usual cosmic background noise. But the patterns were too regular, too organized. Dr. Kim Tae-ho, who had discovered the original Volani message, was the first to recognize what they were seeing. It's them, he told Admiral Song during an emergency briefing. The Dominion. They're already here. The sensor data showed massive energy signatures moving through the outer solar system. Ships, dozens of them, conducting what appeared to be reconnaissance sweeps. They weren't hiding their presence anymore. How long before they reach Earth? Asked President Han. Based on their current speed and search pattern, maybe 6 months, replied Tae-ho. They're being thorough, mapping our entire system, cataloging our resources. Admiral Song felt the weight of command settling on her shoulders. They're giving us time to surrender. It's part of their standard procedure. They want us to see how hopeless resistance is. So what do we do? Asked General Kim. Admiral Song looked around the room at Earth's leadership. Scientists, politicians, military officers, all of them united by the knowledge that their species faced extinction. For the first time in human history, every nation on Earth faced the same enemy. We do what humans have always done when faced with impossible odds, she said. We refuse to give up. The next day, President Han Jisoo addressed the world from the United Nations building in New York. The speech was broadcast on every channel, in every language, to every corner of the Earth. My fellow humans, she began, we have learned that we are not alone in the universe. We have also learned that the universe can be a dangerous place. An alien empire called the Dominion is approaching our solar system. They have destroyed hundreds of worlds and billions of innocent beings. She paused, letting the enormity of the threat sink in. The Dominion expects us to surrender. They expect us to beg for mercy they will not give. They have made the same offer to every species they have encountered: submit to slavery and extermination or face immediate destruction. The camera focused on her face as she delivered humanity's response. We choose neither. We choose to fight. We choose to stand together as one species, one people, one world that will not kneel to tyrants. We may not have their numbers or their technology, but we have something they have never encountered before. We have the human spirit, and we will show them what that means. The speech ended with a simple declaration that would echo across the galaxy. Earth stands ready. In the outer solar system, Dominion sensors recorded the broadcast. For the first time in their empire's history, a species had refused both surrender and immediate destruction. War Commander Thax, reviewing the intelligence reports, felt something he had never experienced before. Curiosity. These humans were behaving in ways that didn't match any previous conquest pattern. It would be interesting to see how quickly they learned the futility of resistance. War Commander Thax stood in the command center of the flagship Eternal Dominion, studying the holographic display of the human solar system. The ship was massive, nearly 5 kilometers long, and filled with technology gathered from 100 conquered worlds. Thax himself was a being of living crystal and metal, his consciousness distributed through a network of processors that had once belonged to a species called the Kythera. The humans had been silent for 3 days since their defiant broadcast. This was unusual. Most species spent this time sending desperate messages, offering everything they owned in exchange for mercy. The humans had simply gone quiet and begun moving their ships. "Status report," Thax commanded, his voice echoing from speakers throughout the bridge. Sub-Commander Vex, a tall insectoid being with 4 arms, consulted his instruments. "The humans have 12 space-capable vessels. All are moving toward their outer planets. They appear to be regrouping." Regrouping? Thax processed this information. With 12 ships against our fleet of 300? What possible tactical advantage do they believe they can achieve? Unknown, War Commander. Their behavior does not match any pattern in our databases. Thax had conquered 47 worlds during his centuries of service. He had seen every possible form of resistance: desperate last stands, suicidal attacks, attempts to hide or flee. All had ended the same way: quick defeat followed by efficient processing. Perhaps they are simply inexperienced in warfare, he concluded. Send the standard demonstration. Destroy one of their outer settlements. Show them the futility of resistance. The orders went out across the Dominion fleet. One harvester ship, the Consuming Void, detached from the main formation and headed toward Mars Colony. The colony was small, only 50,000 humans, but it would serve as an adequate example. On Mars, Governor Park Sung-min watched the approaching alien ship through the colony's defense center view screen. He was a calm man who had spent his life managing the terraforming project that was slowly making Mars habitable. Now he found himself facing humanity's first alien enemy. "All civilian transports have departed," reported his aide, Choi Min-jun. "The evacuation is complete." "Good," Park replied. "Now let's see if Admiral Song's plan will work." The Consuming Void was a kilometer-long vessel designed for stripping planets of their resources. Its weapons could level cities in minutes, and its harvesting equipment could process thousands of tons of material per hour. To its crew of enslaved beings from a dozen different worlds, it was invincible. Captain Commander Zek, the ship's leader, was a reptilian creature whose species had served the Dominion for 3 centuries. He had overseen the destruction of Mars-sized colonies many times before. This would be routine. "Beginning orbital bombardment," he announced. "Target the primary population centers." The ship's main weapons charged up, preparing to demonstrate Dominion power to the watching humans. But as the energy beams lanced downward toward the colony, something unexpected happened. The beams struck not buildings, but empty ground. The entire colony was gone. Not destroyed, not hidden, but carefully dismantled and moved. In its place, massive mirrors had been positioned at precise angles across the Martian surface. "What is this?" Zek demanded. The answer came in the form of reflected energy. The Dominion ship's own weapons fire bounced off the mirrors, concentrated and redirected back toward space. But the humans had calculated the angles perfectly. The reflected beams struck not the Consuming Void, but the asteroid field beyond. Mars. Specifically, they struck the hollowed-out asteroid where Commander Park Dong-ho and his hastily assembled fleet were waiting. The asteroid exploded in a flash of nuclear fire, but the explosion was controlled, directed. Hidden inside the asteroid, human engineers had built the largest improvised weapon in history. Hundreds of nuclear warheads, all triggered by the reflected energy from the Dominion ship. The blast wave caught the Consuming Void completely by surprise. The ship's shields, designed to protect against conventional weapons, were overwhelmed by the unexpected attack. The Harvester ship, for the first time in its operational history, took damage. "Impossible," Zek hissed as damage reports flooded his screens. "How did they—" He never finished the question. Commander Park Dong-ho's fleet emerged from the nuclear fireball, 12 human ships moving at maximum speed toward the crippled Dominion vessel. They were mining ships, research vessels, and patrol craft that had been hastily converted for war. Against a healthy Dominion ship, they wouldn't have lasted minutes. But the Consuming Void was no longer healthy. Its shields were down, its weapons, systems damaged, and its crew was in shock from an attack unlike anything in their experience. The human ships opened fire with everything they had. Nuclear missiles, mining lasers, and improvised kinetic weapons struck the alien vessel from all directions. Park Dong-ho's flagship, a converted ore hauler called Second Chance, rammed directly into the Dominion ship's engine section. The explosion lit up the Martian sky like a second sun. When the light faded, the Consuming Void was breaking apart, its hull cracked and its systems failing. Emergency pods ejected from the dying ship as its enslaved crew abandoned their posts. On the flagship Eternal Dominion, War Commander Thax stared at the tactical display in something approaching shock. A red symbol marked the location where the Consuming Void had been. The symbol was flashing, "Vessel destroyed." "How?" he asked. Sub-Commander Vex was reviewing the sensor data, trying to understand what had happened. "The humans used our own weapons against us. Then they attacked with ships that should not have been capable of causing significant damage. Our databases contain no record of such tactics. No, War Commander. Every previous species either attempted conventional warfare or attempted to surrender. None has ever used deception and improvised weapons in this manner." Thax processed this information. In 300 years of Dominion expansion, they had never lost a ship to the species they were conquering. Rebellions by enslaved populations. Yes. Accidents during harvesting operations occasionally, but never a combat loss to a newly encountered species. The humans destroyed their own colony to create a trap, he realized. They sacrificed their own people to damage our ship. No, War Commander. Sensor analysis shows the colony was evacuated. No human life signs were detected during the bombardment. They moved 50,000 people and all their infrastructure without our sensors detecting the operation. This was even more troubling. The humans had anticipated the Dominion's tactics and prepared a counter-strategy. They had shown organizational capabilities and tactical creativity that didn't match their primitive technology level. Send a message to the human leadership, Thax ordered. Inform them that their resistance has been noted. Offer them one final opportunity to surrender before we begin full-scale operations. The message was transmitted on all human communication frequencies. War Commander Thax himself appeared on screens across Earth, his crystalline form imposing and alien. Humans of Earth, his translated voice echoed in every language. You have demonstrated unexpected cunning in destroying one of our vessels. This changes nothing. We are the Dominion. We have conquered 1,000 worlds. Your single victory means nothing against our full fleet. He paused, letting the threat sink in. However, your tactical ability suggests you might be useful as a warrior species. Surrender now, and some of your people will be preserved to serve in our armies. Continue to resist, and you will share the fate of all who oppose us. Complete extermination. The message ended with images from conquered worlds. Cities burning, populations being loaded onto transport ships, entire planets stripped bare of life. On Earth, President Han Ji-soo watched the transmission with her military advisors. The alien commander's offer was clear. Become slaves or die. Ma'am, said Admiral Song Ji-woo, we need to respond. The entire world is watching. President Han stood up and walked to the communication console. She activated the global broadcast system, knowing that her words would reach not just Earth, but the Dominion fleet waiting in the outer system. War Commander Thax, she began, her voice steady and strong. We have reviewed your offer. Slavery or extinction. These are not acceptable choices. She looked directly into the camera, her eyes hard as steel. You seem surprised that we fought back. You shouldn't be. Humans have a saying. The only easy day was yesterday. Every day we face challenges that seem impossible. Every day we find ways to overcome them. The camera pulled back to show her standing in the United Nations Assembly Hall, representatives from every nation on Earth behind her. You conquered 1,000 worlds because they tried to meet you on your terms. They fought your kind of war, by your rules, using tactics you understood. We will not make that mistake. Her voice rose, carrying the determination of an entire species. We are humans. We are unpredictable, unreasonable, and we never give up. You want to see what that means? Come and find out. The transmission ended. Across the solar system, human ships began moving into positions that made no sense according to any military doctrine the Dominion had ever encountered. War Commander Thax studied the new tactical displays with growing unease. The humans were dispersing their forces, hiding behind asteroids. 3 months after the destruction of the consuming void, strange things began happening across the galaxy. Ships that had been silent for decades suddenly came to life. Hidden colonies that everyone thought were dead started sending signals. Species that the Dominion had marked as extinct began reaching out to each other through secret networks. The news spread like wildfire. Someone had fought the Dominion and won. Ambassador Kwon Mi-ran stood in the communications center of Luna Station, surrounded by screens showing incoming messages from across known space. She was Earth's first ambassador to the Galactic Underground, a position that had been created only weeks ago when they realized how many civilizations were still out there, hiding and waiting. Another signal from the Centauri region reported. Communications Officer Lee Ju-won. They're calling themselves the Free Vega Coalition. They want to know if the reports about Earth are true." "What reports?" asked Miran. "That humans destroyed a Dominion harvester ship and are still fighting." Miran smiled grimly. The story of Commander Park Dong-ho's sacrifice had somehow spread across dozens of star systems. Each telling made the victory sound bigger and more dramatic. Some versions claimed that humans had destroyed an entire Dominion fleet. Others said that Earth had weapons that could crack planets in half. The truth was both simpler and more complex. Humanity had won one battle through cleverness and sacrifice. But that single victory had done something the Dominion never expected. It had given hope to species that had given up hope long ago. "Put me through to Vega," Miran said. "Let's see who else is out there." The first face to appear on the main screen was unlike anything humans had ever seen. It looked like a flower made of crystal, with petals that shifted color as it spoke. "I am Elder Silas of the Villani," the being said in accented but clear English. "We received your message about remembering our people. We thought you should know. We are not all dead." The communication center went silent. Dr. Park So-jin, who had translated the original Villani distress call, stepped forward with tears in her eyes. "How many?" she asked. "How many of you survived?" "Not many," Silas replied. "Perhaps 50,000, scattered across hidden bases and asteroid fields and dead worlds. We have been running and hiding for 4 years, waiting for the galaxy to forget us so we could die in peace. But you heard about our victory?" Everyone heard. The story is spreading through every hidden network, every secret colony. For the first time in centuries, people are asking the same question. If humans can fight the Dominion and win, why can't we? Over the following days, more contacts came in. The Nithara, crystalline beings who could survive in the vacuum of space, had been hiding in the rings of gas giant planets. The Voidkin, shapeshifters who could mimic any form, had been infiltrating Dominion ships and sabotaging them from within. The Axiom Collective, artificial intelligences who had learned to hide their signals in cosmic background radiation. Each species had developed their own survival methods, but none had tried to fight back. They had all accepted that the Dominion was too powerful, too organized, too inevitable to resist. "Until now," said Dr. Yang Subin during a briefing with Earth's leadership, "the psychological impact of our victory cannot be overstated. We didn't just destroy a ship, we destroyed a myth." Admiral Song Ji-woo studied the star charts, showing all the hidden civilizations they had discovered. "How many are we talking? About? Conservative estimate? Maybe 200 million survivors across 50 different species? But Subin," she looked at the psychologist, "they've been hiding and running for so long. Can they really fight?" Yang Subin nodded. "Fear can paralyze, but it can also teach survival skills. These species have learned to be invisible, to strike from shadows, to think creatively about problems. Those are exactly the skills we need." On the other side of the solar system, War Commander Thax was dealing with his own problems. Reports were coming in from across Dominion space about increased rebel activity. Ships were disappearing, supply convoys were being attacked, slaves were escaping in numbers not seen for decades. "The humans are responsible for this," he told Sub-Commander Vex. "Their resistance has inspired organized rebellion." "How is that possible?" Vex asked. "We control all major communication networks." "Apparently, not all of them. These species have been developing hidden networks for generations. Information travels through channels we never knew existed. Thakak studied intelligence reports from a dozen sectors." The pattern was clear. News of humanity's victory had reached even the most isolated refugee populations. The story was growing with each telling, becoming a legend of hope and defiance. "Sir," interrupted Communications Officer Mech, a small, amphibious being, "we're receiving a transmission from Earth. It's addressed to all surviving civilizations in this galactic arm. Put it through. The main screen activated, showing Ambassador Quan Miran standing in what appeared to be a vast assembly hall. Behind her, representatives from dozens of different species sat together at a circular table. "People of the galaxy," Miran began, "my name is Quan Miran, and I speak for the newly formed Galactic Liberation Council. We are refugees, survivors, and rebels who have decided that hiding is not enough anymore." She gestured to the beings behind her. "We represent over 50 species that the Dominion thought were extinct. We have been watching from the shadows, waiting for someone to show us that resistance is possible. Humanity has shown us that the Dominion can be beaten." Thax felt something he had never experienced before: concern. This was not how conquered species were supposed to behave. "We are not asking anyone to fight," Miran continued. "We are asking you to choose. You can continue hiding, living in fear, watching your children grow up as refugees, or you can stand with us and take back the galaxy that belongs to all of us." The transmission ended with coordinates and encryption codes for secure communication. Networks that the Dominion had never detected. "Sir," Vex said quietly, "this is unprecedented. They're forming an alliance." "I can see that." Thax reviewed the tactical implications. Fighting one stubborn species was manageable. Fighting an alliance of dozens of species, each with their own technologies and tactics, would be exponentially more difficult. "Shall we accelerate our timeline? Strike Earth before this alliance can organize?" Thax considered this. The logical choice was to eliminate the source of the rebellion quickly, but his previous attempts at quick solutions had failed. The humans kept surprising him. "No. We will proceed methodically, but increase surveillance on all known refugee populations. If they want to reveal themselves to join this alliance, we will be ready." Back on Earth, the first joint military exercises were beginning. General Lim Jae-sung watched as human soldiers, trained alongside Volani refugees, Nethara crystal singers, and Voidkin shapeshifters. It was chaotic, confusing, and completely unlike any military training he had ever seen. "How do you train an army when half your soldiers can change shape, and the other half communicate through harmonic vibrations?" he asked his aide. "Very carefully, sir," replied Major Kim Soo-jin. "But look at what they're learning from each other." Jae-sung watched as a human engineer worked with a Nethara to modify a standard rifle. The Nethara could see electromagnetic spectra that humans couldn't detect, while the human understood kinetic energy transfer in ways the crystal being never had. Together, they were creating weapons that neither species could have designed alone. The Dominion has never faced anything like this, he realized. They're used to fighting one species at a time with predictable tactics and technologies. We're giving them 50 different kinds of unpredictability. Across the training ground, other partnerships were forming. Voidkin infiltrators were learning human stealth techniques. Axiom AIs were sharing encryption methods with human hackers. Volani artists were teaching humans how to use sound as a weapon. But the most important development was happening in the command centers, where strategists from different species were learning to think together. The Dominion's greatest strength was their unified command structure. Now they would face an enemy that could coordinate dozens of different tactical approaches simultaneously. Elder Silas of the Volani found himself working closely with Captain Kim Tae-ho, the human who had first heard his people's distress call. Together, they were developing new communication protocols that could coordinate attacks across multiple star systems. "Your species is remarkable," Silas told Tae-ho during one of their planning sessions. "We spent 4 years learning to hide. You spent 4 months learning to fight. But more than that, you learned to bring others together." "We had a good teacher," Tae-ho replied. "Your people's message taught us something important. No one should face extinction alone." The alliance was growing stronger every day. Species that had been enemies before the Dominion arrived learned to work together. Technologies were shared freely. Ancient grudges were set aside in favor of survival. But the most significant change was psychological. For the first time in centuries, the hidden civilizations of the galaxy had hope. They were no longer just running and hiding. They were preparing to take back their worlds. War Commander Thax received daily reports about the growing alliance. His intelligence officers estimated that the rebels now had access to. Captain Bai Ye-jin floated in zero gravity inside the modified cargo hold of her ship, the Silent Thunder. Around her, beings from 5 different species worked together to prepare for humanity's most ambitious mission yet. The ship itself was a mixture of human engineering and alien technology that would have been impossible just 6 months ago. "Final systems check," she announced through her helmet communicator. The response came back in 3 different languages, all confirming readiness. The mission was simple in concept, but nearly impossible in execution. Intelligence gathered by Voidkin infiltrators had located a Dominion processing facility in the Kepler 186 system. The facility was where captured populations were taken for resource extraction. In simple terms, it was where the Dominion turned living beings into raw materials. 3 million enslaved beings from a dozen different worlds were being held there, waiting to be processed. The Galactic Liberation Council had voted unanimously. They were going to get them out. "Captain," called out Dr. Oh Sung-min, the mission's chief engineer, "the hybrid drive systems are showing green across all indicators. We're as ready as we're ever going to be." Oh had spent months working with Axiom Collective Artificial Intelligences to create new technologies that combined human creativity with alien science. The Silent Thunder now carried weapons that could phase through solid matter, shields that could bend light around the ship, and engines that could move through dimensions the Dominion didn't know existed. "What's our estimated approach time?" Bai asked. 14 hours if we use the dimensional tunnels the Nathara showed us," replied Navigator Young-Hai Rim. "The facility won't see us coming until we're already inside their perimeter." The crew was unlike anything that had ever existed before. Humans worked alongside Villani harmony singers who could disable electronics with their voices. Nathara crystal beings provided navigation through spaces between dimensions. Voidkin shapeshifters prepared to infiltrate Dominion systems. Axiom AIs calculated probability matrices that took into account variables no organic mind could process. But the most important member of the team was someone who wasn't even on the ship. Elder Silas of the Villani was coordinating the mission from a hidden base in the asteroid belt, using communication methods that the Dominion couldn't detect or intercept. "All teams, this is Silas." His harmonic voice came through their communication systems. "Intelligence update from our infiltrators. The facility is holding populations from the Cathara homeworld, 2 human colony ships that disappeared last year, and survivors from the Miran system." Bai felt her hands tighten on her command chair. The 2 colony ships had carried nearly 50,000 people, including children. They had vanished during routine supply runs, and everyone had assumed they were lost to space accidents. "Confirmed target priorities," she said. "Rescue operations take precedence over facility destruction. We save lives first." "Understood, Captain. Begin final approach." The Silent Thunder and its escort of 12 other hybrid ships moved through, folded space toward their target. Each ship was different, combining technologies from multiple species in ways that even their crews didn't fully understand. They were the first truly collaborative weapons ever built in the galaxy. 14 hours later, they emerged from dimensional space directly inside the Dominion facility's defensive perimeter. Alarms immediately began blaring as Dominion sensors detected ships that shouldn't exist using technologies they had never seen before. "All teams begin rescue operations," Bai ordered. "Remember, speed and confusion are our advantages." The facility was enormous, a collection of processing plants and holding areas that could handle millions of beings at once. But it had been designed to defend against external attacks, not against ships that could appear inside its structure. Voidkin infiltrators who had been hiding inside the facility for weeks began their sabotage operations. Security systems shut down, doors opened, and transportation networks started moving prisoners toward evacuation points instead of processing centers. Meanwhile, Villani Harmony singers aboard the rescue ships used their voices to create vibrations that disrupted Dominion communication networks. The facility's defenders found themselves unable to coordinate their response as their equipment failed in cascading waves of harmonic interference. "This is impossible," snarled Facility Commander Gorth, a large reptilian being who had overseen the processing of 200 worlds. "How are they inside our shields?" His operations officer, a cybernetic being called Unit 47, was frantically trying to restore communication systems. "Unknown technology, Commander. Our sensors show ships that exist in multiple dimensional phases simultaneously." "What does that mean?" "It means they can be in several places at once while being nowhere we can target them." On the Silent Thunder, Bay watched her tactical display as rescue teams moved through the facility. Human Marines worked with Nathara phase shifters to reach holding areas that were supposed to be impregnable. Axiom combat programs took control of Dominion robots and turned them against their masters. "Captain," reported Chief Rescue Coordinator Kim Min-jung, "we've reached the primary holding areas. The humans from the colony ships are here, but they're in bad condition. The Dominion has been using them for biological experiments." Bay felt rage building in her chest, but she forced it down. Anger could wait. Right now, people needed saving. Get them to the medical ships immediately. What about the other populations? The Kythera are being held in the deep levels. The Mirans are in the processing queues. We're moving as fast as we can, but there are so many of them. The rescue operation continued for 3 hours. Alliance ships moved through the facility like ghosts, appearing where they were needed, disappearing when Dominion forces tried to respond. They had never fought an enemy that could be everywhere and nowhere at the same time. But the most remarkable thing was happening in the holding areas themselves. As word spread that rescue was coming, the prisoners began helping their rescuers. Beings who had given up hope found strength they didn't know they still had. Dr. Sarah Chen, one of the human colonists who had been imprisoned for 8 months, found herself helping to organize evacuation routes for alien prisoners she had never seen before. "Why are you helping us?" asked a Kythera engineer named Tech-9, his cybernetic implants sparking from Dominion torture devices. "Because that's what humans do," Sarah replied simply. "We help each other, all of us." As the rescue operations neared completion, Facility Commander Gorth made a desperate decision. If he couldn't stop the rescue, he would destroy the facility and everyone in it. He began charging the facility's self-destruct systems. "Captain Bay," warned Dr. Oh Seung-min, "massive energy buildup detected. They're going to destroy the entire facility." Estimated time to detonation: 8 minutes. Bay looked at her rescue status display. They had evacuated nearly 2 million beings, but almost 1 million more were still trapped in the deeper levels of the facility. "All teams, emergency acceleration. We have 8 minutes to get everyone out." What happened next would be remembered as one of the greatest acts of cooperation in galactic history. Human ships used their superior speed to reach trapped populations. Nathara crystal beings used their ability to phase through solid matter, to guide people through walls and barriers. Voidkin shapeshifters took the forms of Dominion guards to lead prisoners to safety. Axiom AIs calculated optimal evacuation routes in real time, but it was the prisoners themselves who made the difference. Instead of panicking, they organized. Instead of fighting for limited space on rescue ships, they helped each other. Beings who had been enemies before the Dominion arrived worked together to save lives. With 30 seconds left before detonation, the last rescue ship cleared the facility's perimeter. Captain Bay watched through her rear sensors as the massive structure exploded in a ball of nuclear fire. "Final count," she asked quietly. Kim Min-jung consulted her reports. 2,947,000 rescued. 53,000 we couldn't reach in time. The bridge went silent. They had achieved the impossible, saving nearly 3 million lives in a single operation. But the cost of those, they couldn't save, weighed heavily on everyone. "Captain," said Dr. O. "Incoming transmission from War Commander Thax." The main screen activated, showing the crystalline form of the Dominion leader. His usual calm demeanor was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. "You have crossed a line," he said, his voice carrying harmonics of rage. "That facility represented months of careful processing. You have cost us valuable resources." "Good," Bay replied simply. "We're going to cost you a lot more." "You think this changes anything? We have hundreds of such facilities, thousands of worlds under our control. You cannot save them all." Captain Bay looked at her crew, beings from multiple species who had worked together to achieve something the Dominion thought impossible. "Maybe not," she said, "but we're going to try. And every person we save is another person who knows that the Dominion can be beaten." She leaned forward in her chair. "Here's what you need to understand, Thax. You built your empire on fear. You convinced everyone that resistance was hopeless. But we've proven that's a lie. And now everyone knows it." The transmission ended. In the space around the destroyed facility, Admiral Yoon Hae-won stood in the command center of the Alliance flagship Unity's Dawn, watching the largest fleet in galactic history prepare for battle. Around her, holographic displays showed the positions of over 800 ships from 50 different species, all converging on a single point in space: the Nexus. The Nexus was a massive space station that controlled hyperspace routes throughout this entire arm of the galaxy. Whoever controlled it could move fleets instantly between star systems while blocking enemy movement. For 300 years, the Dominion had used it as their primary strategic hub. Today, the Galactic Liberation Alliance was going to take it away from them. "Status report from all fleet commanders," Hae-won ordered. The responses came in dozens of different languages, all translated by Axiom AI systems into clear tactical data. Human ships reported ready. Volani Harmony fleets confirmed their sonic disruptors were charged. Nathara crystal ships had positioned themselves in dimensional fold space. Voidkin infiltration units were already inside Dominion vessels. The rescued. Populations from the processing facilities had formed their own fighting squadrons, armed with captured Dominion weapons and burning with the desire for revenge. "All fleets report ready for combat operations," announced Fleet Coordinator Kim So-young. "Enemy strength estimate, 400 Dominion warships, including their flagship Eternal Dominion." Admiral Yoon studied the tactical display. The numbers were closer than they had ever been, but the Dominion still had advantages. Their ships were larger, their weapons more powerful, and they had centuries of combat experience. "What about our special asset?" she asked. Lieutenant Ko Jin-woo looked up from his computer station. He was young, barely 25, but he had discovered something that might change the course of the entire war. "Ready to deploy, Admiral. The logic virus is loaded and waiting for transmission." Jin-woo had been working with Axiom AIs and Volani artists for months on a project that sounded impossible. A computer virus that could think, adapt, and spread through enemy networks while using sound frequencies to confuse organic minds. It combined human programming, artificial intelligence, and alien art into something that had never existed before. "Remember," Hae-won said to her command staff, "this battle isn't just about winning. It's about proving that the Dominion can be beaten by organized resistance. Every species in the galaxy is watching. We succeed here, and rebellions will start on 100 worlds. We fail, and the resistance movement dies with us." The Alliance fleet began its final approach to the Nexus. The station was enormous, larger than most moons, bristling with weapons and surrounded by defensive ships. It had never been successfully attacked in its 3-century history. War Commander Thax waited in the station's central command center, surrounded by his most experienced officers. He had been expecting this attack for weeks, ever since intelligence. Reports confirmed the Alliance was massing ships. "They're finally coming," he told Sub-Commander Vex. 800 ships against our 400. They think numbers will be enough. "Our ships are superior in firepower and defensive capabilities," Vex replied, "and we're fighting from a fixed position with the station's weapons supporting us." Thax nodded, but something troubled him. The humans and their allies had never tried to win through superior numbers before. They specialized in unexpected tactics and creative solutions. This direct assault felt wrong somehow. "Maintain defensive positions," he ordered. "Let them come to us." The first phase of the battle began as both fleets opened fire at maximum range. Space lit up with energy beams, missile trails, and the explosions of dying ships. The Dominion's superior firepower began to tell immediately. Alliance ships were taking heavy casualties. "We're losing too many ships," reported Captain Lee Sang-ho from the human battle group. "The Dominion weapons are cutting through our shields." Admiral Yoon had expected this. "Phase 2. All ships. Execute scatter pattern." What happened next confused every Dominion tactical officer. Instead of concentrating their firepower for a decisive push, the Alliance fleet broke apart into hundreds of small groups. Each group contained ships from different species, and each began moving in seemingly random directions. "What are they doing?" demanded Thax. "This makes no strategic sense." The answer became clear within minutes. The scattered Alliance groups weren't moving randomly. They were using techniques developed by each species during their years of hiding from the Dominion. Human ships used asteroid fields for cover. Nethera vessels phased through dimensions to appear behind enemy lines. Voidkin infiltrators began sabotaging Dominion ships from within. Volani harmony singers created interference patterns that disrupted enemy communications. Most importantly, the Axiom AIs began implementing Latinko Jinwu's logic virus. The virus spread through Dominion computer networks like wildfire, but it wasn't just destroying data. It was learning, adapting, and evolving with each system it infected. Worse, it was using Volani harmonic patterns to create audio frequencies that caused confusion and disorientation in organic minds. "Sir," reported Dominion Communications Officer, "Hex 9, we're experiencing system failures across multiple ships. Computer networks are singing." "Singing?" Thakex demanded. "The infected systems are producing harmonic frequencies. Our crews are reporting difficulty concentrating, loss of coordination, and in some cases, complete disorientation." This was something Thakex had never encountered. The Dominion's greatest strength was their rigid hierarchy and perfect coordination. But coordination required communication, and communication required clear thinking. As the logic virus spread, Dominion ships began losing their tactical unity. Individual captains found themselves making decisions without orders. Fleet formations broke apart as ships drifted out of position. The perfect Dominion war machine began to stutter and fail. "All ships fall back to the Nexus perimeter," Thax ordered. But his command took minutes to reach some ships and never reached others at all. Admiral Yoon watched the Dominion fleet's coordination collapse with satisfaction. "Now we show them what real teamwork looks like. All Alliance groups converge on the station. Execute Symphony Protocol." Symphony Protocol was the Alliance's masterpiece of cooperative warfare. Each species had contributed their unique abilities to create a coordinated attack pattern that was impossible for any single species to execute alone. Human ships used their speed and agility to draw defensive fire. Nethera crystal vessels appeared inside the station's shields using dimensional phasing. Voidkin shapeshifters, already infiltrating key systems, began opening docking bays and disabling weapons. Volani harmony fleets created resonance patterns that weakened the station's structural integrity. Axiom AIs took control of the station's own defensive systems and turned them against the Dominion. But the most important contribution came from the rescued populations. Former slaves who knew Dominion technology intimately guided Alliance forces to critical systems. Kithara engineers who had been forced to maintain Dominion equipment now helped destroy it. Miran technicians who had been tortured for their knowledge now used that knowledge for liberation. "They're inside the station," reported Vex, his voice tight with something approaching panic. "Multiple breach points, coordinated attacks on primary systems." Thacax watched his tactical displays as red warning symbols spread across the Nexus like an infection. 300 years of Dominion dominance were crumbling in a matter of hours. "Impossible," he said. "How can so many different species coordinate? This precisely?" The answer came from an unexpected source. A communication channel opened, and Admiral Yoon's voice filled the Dominion Command Center. "Because we learned from you, Thax. You taught the galaxy what happens when different species work together. The problem is, you only knew how to make them work together through fear and slavery. We learned how to make them work together through choice and hope." On the main battle display, Thax could see Alliance forces moving through the station like blood through veins. They weren't just conquering the Nexus, they were liberating it. Dominion slaves throughout the station were rising up, guided by Alliance forces and armed with weapons taken from their captors. "You cannot hold this station," Thax said into the communication channel. "Even if you take it, we will return with more ships, more weapons." "Maybe," Admiral Yoon replied. "But you're missing the point. This isn't about holding territory. This is about proving that you can be beaten." She was right, and Thax knew it. The battle for the Nexus was being broadcast across the galaxy through hidden networks that the Dominion had never suspected existed. On 1,000 worlds, enslaved populations were watching the myth of Dominion invincibility crumble in real time. "Sir," Vex said quietly, "we should evacuate to the Eternal Dominion. The station is lost." Thax looked around the command center that had been the heart of Dominion power in this sector. Lights were flickering as Alliance forces took control of critical systems. In the distance, he could hear the sounds of combat as his remaining. Troops fought desperately against superior numbers and impossible coordination. "No," he said, "we make our stand here. If the Dominion is to fall, let it fall with dignity." But even as he spoke, Thax knew the truth. The Dominion wasn't just losing a battle. 6 months after the liberation of the Nexus, Ambassador Jo Yun-seo stood in the Great Assembly Hall on Valani Prime, watching delegates from over 200 species take their seats for the first session of the Galactic Liberation Council. The planet that had once been stripped bare by the Dominion was green again, its cities rebuilt with architecture that blended the artistic traditions of dozens of civilizations. "Hard to believe this is the same world we found 4 years ago," said Dr. Park So-jin, who had become the Council's chief translator. She was working with translation devices that could handle over 300 different languages simultaneously, including some that communicated through color changes and harmonic vibrations. "The Valani were always builders and artists," replied Elder Silas, his crystalline form shimmering with patterns of joy. "We simply needed hope to begin creating again." Yun-seo looked around the hall with pride and amazement. Where the original United Nations had represented one species from one world, the Galactic Liberation Council represented the free peoples of an entire arm of the galaxy. Humans sat beside Valani harmony singers. Nethara crystal beings worked with Axiom artificial intelligences, and former Dominion slaves shared tables with their former guards who had chosen freedom over tyranny. The transformation hadn't been easy. After the fall of the Nexus, the Dominion Empire had collapsed faster than anyone expected. Rebellions erupted on thousands of worlds as news of the victory spread. Within weeks, most of the Dominion fleet had either surrendered or been overwhelmed by their own slaves. But winning the war had been simpler than winning the peace. Hundreds of species that had been enemies before the Dominion conquered them suddenly found themselves free neighbors again. Old conflicts resurfaced. Some worlds wanted revenge against their former oppressors. Others wanted to return to isolation. "The Council will come to order," announced President Han Ji-soo, who had been elected as the first leader of the new galactic government. Her hair was completely gray now, aged by the stress of 4 years of war and 6 months of even more difficult diplomacy. The first item of business was a report from Captain Kim Soo-ho, who now commanded the exploration vessel New Horizons. His ship was part of the Liberation Fleet, a joint force that traveled to isolated worlds to offer them a choice. The galaxy hadn't seen in centuries voluntary cooperation instead of forced submission. "We have made contact with 17 new civilizations in the past month," Soo-ho reported. 15 have chosen to join the Council. 2 have requested more time to consider. None have been forced to make any decision. This was the fundamental principle that separated the new galactic government from the old Dominion. Every species, every world, every individual had the right to choose their own path. It made governing much more complicated, but it also made it just. "What about the former Dominion core worlds?" asked Representative Chen Wei from the Asian Federation. The question brought silence to the hall. The Dominion's original homeworlds were still largely cut off from the rest of the galaxy. Some had accepted liberation and were trying to build new societies. Others remained hostile, unable to accept that their empire of 3 centuries was truly ended. "We continue to offer aid and cooperation," President Han replied. "Some worlds are beginning to respond positively. Others will take more time." War Commander Thak-X, who now served as an advisor to the Council, stood to address the assembly. His crystalline form had changed since his capture, becoming more transparent, more reflective. Former Dominion citizens said it was a sign of personal growth, of learning to see beyond his own perspective. "The core worlds fear punishment," he said, his translated voice carrying undertones of regret. "For 3 centuries, they ruled through force and fear. They cannot understand a conqueror who offers forgiveness instead of revenge." "Then we keep showing them," said Admiral Yoon Hai-won, who now commanded the Council's peacekeeping forces. "Every day we choose cooperation over conquest. We prove that a different way is possible." This philosophy was being tested across the galaxy. On some worlds, former slaves and masters were learning to live together as equals. On others, the transition was more difficult. There had been violence, mistakes, and failures. But there had also been unexpected successes and moments of remarkable reconciliation. One of the most successful integration projects was happening right here on Villani Prime. The planet's new cities housed not just Villani, but refugees from dozens of worlds that had been destroyed by the Dominion. Different species had contributed their knowledge and skills to create something beautiful and entirely new. "Next on our agenda," President Han announced, "is the proposal for the memorial gardens." Dr. Choi Hye-jin, now the Council's chief archivist, stood to present her project. Over the past 6 months, she had been working with historians from every member species to create a comprehensive record of what the galaxy had lost to the Dominion. "We have documented the destruction of over 800 civilizations," she reported. "Billions of lives lost, countless works of art and science destroyed, entire cultures erased from existence." The hall grew quiet as holographic displays showed images from dead worlds. Empty cities, silent planets, the geometric scars that marked where the Dominion had harvested entire civilizations. "But we have also found something unexpected," Hye-jin continued. "Survivors, hidden archives, preserved memories. The Dominion was thorough, but they were not perfect. Pieces of these lost civilizations still exist, and we can help them grow again. The memorial gardens would be more than just a monument to the dead. They would be living repositories of lost knowledge, places where the surviving fragments of destroyed civilizations could be preserved and shared. Each species would contribute their memories, their art, their science, and their stories to ensure that nothing would be truly forgotten. The gardens will serve another purpose, added Elder Silas. They will remind us why we must never allow such destruction to happen again. As the session continued, reports came in from across the galaxy. The Cathara had rebuilt their homeworld and were sharing their cybernetic technology to help disabled beings from other species. The Axiom Collective was developing new AI systems that could think creatively while remaining ethical. Former Dominion. Military units were being retrained as rescue and exploration forces. But perhaps the most significant development was happening in the border regions, where the first joint colonies were being established. These were worlds where multiple species chose to live together, sharing their knowledge and cultures to create something entirely new. We're seeing the emergence of hybrid technologies and art forms that no single species could have created. Alone, reported Dr. Yang Subin, who was studying the psychological effects of large-scale cooperation. Children who grow up in these mixed communities are developing ways of thinking that none of us could have imagined. The session was interrupted by an urgent communication from the Outer Rim territories. Captain Lee Min-ho, who had discovered the original Villani distress signal, appeared on the main screen. His hair was white now, but his eyes still held the curiosity that had led him to investigate that first cry for help. "Council leadership," he said. "We've received a distress signal from the Andromeda sector. A species called the Helix Confederation is under attack by something they call the Void Swarm. They're requesting assistance." The hall buzzed with conversation. The Void Swarm was unknown to any of their databases, but the pattern was familiar. Another aggressive force, another threatened civilization, another cry for help reaching across the darkness of space. President Han looked around the assembly at the faces of beings from hundreds of different worlds. 4 years ago, humanity had been alone in the universe. Now they were part of something much larger and more beautiful than they had ever imagined. "How long to reach the Andromeda sector?" she asked. 3 weeks with our fastest ships," Captain Lee replied. "Then we leave immediately." President Han stood, her voice carrying the authority of an entire galactic alliance. "We learned something important during our war with the Dominion. No one should face extinction alone." Ambassador Jo Yunseo smiled as she watched the delegates rise from their seats. Representatives from 200 species speaking 300 languages, united by a simple principle: when someone cries for help, you answer. The council session adjourned as ships began preparing for departure. The New Horizons, the Unities. Dawn and dozens of other vessels from the Liberation Fleet would carry aid to another corner of the galaxy. But they wouldn't go as conquerors or as a single species trying to impose their will. They would go as representatives of the galaxy's free peoples, offering the same choice that humanity had offered to the Villani, to the Dominion, to everyone. Cooperation instead of conquest, hope instead of fear, unity instead of isolation. Later that evening, researcher An Hyo-jin sat in her laboratory aboard the exploration ship Distant Light, monitoring long-range communications as she had for the past 4 years. The signal from the Helix Confederation was still coming through, desperate and frightened, begging for someone to hear their plea. "Don't worry," she said quietly to the empty space between stars. "We hear you. We're coming."